All right, let's go ahead and get started.
All right, so we're good to go. Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon Raisler. I'm a faculty member here at the College of Law and the director of the Hubble Environmental Law Initiative. It is a pleasure to introduce the students who will be speaking next and to tell you what they'll be speaking about. So because of the generous support of Fred and Charlotte Hubble through the initiative, we are able to sponsor internships in the summer at nonprofits and governmental organizations in the field of environmental, energy, and natural resources law. And for the next 30 minutes, you're going to hear from 8 students who got to do that work over the summer. So I will not take any more time away from them and turn it over to the students.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Sam William, and I worked for the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy over the summer. Thank you to Healy for making these opportunities possible, and now I'll get started with what I worked on. So the big overarching project that I worked on had to do with the water program at MCEA, and it stemmed to wetlands conservation. So as many of you know, in 2023, there was a big Supreme Court decision titled Sackett v. EPA. And in that decision, they changed the standard for which wetlands would be considered waters of the United States, or WOTUS, under the Clean Water Act. So the previous standard had been a significant nexus standard, and it allowed wetlands to enjoy the federal protections that our lakes and rivers enjoy. After the decision, those federal protections dropped as the new standard was a continuous surface connection. So getting into the history of Minnesota, since its colonization, Minnesota has had approximately a 50% loss in their wetlands. In the 1980s, researchers caught on, and in 1991, they passed the Wetlands Conservation Act. Now, after the Sackett decision, as I'm sure you can imagine, the Minnesota legislatures and agencies started getting to work very quickly to fill the gaps by enacting state laws and rules to help protect our wetlands. The purpose of the WCA is actually no net loss. We've already lost quite a bit. Let's not lose any more. So what I did throughout the summer is extensive research into legislative history, into statements of need and response and reasonableness, into scientific research with wetlands, and we were crafting a comment letter to the Board of Water and Soil Resources. After a whole summer of research and drafting and strategizing, we came out with a nice comment letter. And if you want to look it up, you actually can online. I'm quite proud of that. Another area I worked in was in the energy program with MCEA. And so there is a regulatory agency called MISO, not to be confused with MISO, which I always like to say, as in the soup. And it stands for the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. It's big fancy words for basically they do the regulations of the utility companies in the Midwest, down the big strip from Minnesota all the way down to the bottom. And so MISO had proposed a Tranche 1 program that was approved in 2022. And I was given the task of, well, there's a whole comment period process, as we all know, with agencies. And so I would receive all the comments, and I was kind of the first filter for the attorney. So I would review the comments. I would kind of flag issues when I thought there might be some pushback. And also I gave some recommendations as well. It was pretty fun to see, the comments come in, to see what people had to say. But the idea of these tranches and why they were so important and why we were supporting it was they were basically bolstering and creating new infrastructure for our energy loads. Our loads, I think our capacity was only at like 225 kilowatts, I want to say right now. And they were trying to increase that because the idea is if you increase the load capacity, you have more room for renewable energy sources, which, I think is something that we would all want. The third program that I worked on had to do with changes in the rules to feedlots. So as many of us know, big farms have things called CAFOs, or concentrated animal feeding operations. And when you have a lot of animals, they create a lot of manure. Well, manure storage and management can get pretty tricky when you have huge volumes, and it can be especially problematic in something called a karst region. So karst is a type of sediment that is very porous, and what it does is when there's manure leaking into it, it very quickly travels to the groundwater. So there were some new rules proposed with regulating that, and I took a part in doing extensive research on the issue, strategizing, and preparing comments on that. And there's many more other things that I worked on throughout my time with MCEA, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I was definitely afraid I wouldn't be able to get the slideshow just to change, but I'm Keegan, and last summer I was at the Department of Justice in the Environment and Natural Resources Division, and then more specifically than that, I was in the Environmental Enforcement section, so they do like all the civil enforcement. And even more specifically than that, I was in the 7 and 10 group, which corresponds to EPA Region 7 and 10, so like a chunk of the Midwest, and then the Pacific Northwest. And I have no idea why those are lumped together, but they just are. And I'm so grateful to Healy for sponsoring me this summer. Because of the funding, I was able to spend most of the summer working in person in DC, which is very cool. We got a lot of tours of like various federal buildings. We got a private tour of the Supreme Court building, which was very cool. We didn't get to meet any of the justices, even though I know that they were there because there was an oral argument earlier that morning, but they declined to come out and meet us. But it was a very cool tour. We got to see like the library because apparently during oral arguments, this is just a fun fact, it's not related to what I like worked on, but apparently during oral arguments, they don't have any electronics. So if one of the justices wants to reference like a library or like a dictionary definition or something from the library, they like press a button and request it from the library. And all the librarians have to run around and like look for it in real time. And then they put it on a dumbwaiter and it goes up to the room where they're doing oral arguments. So crazy system. Yeah, 2024. And then last and not least, working in person, of course, allowed me to meet all the attorneys and the other class of summer interns, which was a really great experience. While I was there, I worked on like a lot of different projects, but I would say the bulk of it had to do with researching the penalty factors under the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, and applying those. I got to do one like sort of time sensitive project, not outside of business hours, of course, because it's the government and we don't have to do that. But it had to do whether the EPA could get an administrative warrant to go search a facility. So that was very cool. And then I have a specific interest in water law, and DOJ was really great about letting me work on specifically water-related issues. So not only the Clean Water Act, but also I got to do some stuff related to CAFOs and related to CIDWA. And then my probably favorite thing that I didn't actually like work substantively on, but I got to attend all the conference calls related to Portland Harbor, which is a huge Superfund site. And it's really like groundbreaking stuff as far as like settlements and Superfund. And I learned that some attorneys are spending their entire careers just working on this one Superfund site, which is pretty astonishing to me. My hat is off to them, and I hope that I will not do that. But I had a really great summer, and I'm so grateful to Healy.
Hi, my name is Mackenzie Holmes, and I worked with the Iowa Attorney General's office this summer, specifically in the environmental division with the lovely Assistant Attorney General Jake Larson. I was originally hired to focus on a bill that Kim Reynolds passed that changed the requirements for foreign land ownership, but that ended up taking a lot less time than we expected it to. So I ended up being on a couple other big projects. A lot of you may know that in the middle of March or so, New Cooperative, a farming co-op, had a big fertilizer spill down in Red Oak, Iowa. It was a very, very unfortunate situation with a lot of just coincidences that all lined up and led to 265,000 gallons of nitrogen fertilizer being dumped into the East Nishnabotna River. And so it ended up killing like 750,000 fish. And so it was a big deal, but New Cooperative had been very cooperative the entire time. So it was really easy to start working through, but we were starting to form our petition when I was there. So I spent a lot of time understanding fertilizers and drainage and all of the things that involved it. And so that was a really interesting experience for me. Another thing that I spent a lot of time on was a wind turbine dumping site. Companies like Mid-American and GM have wind turbines all over the state, and when the blades have to get recycled, they usually hire someone to take care of that for them. And so they did. And the company ended up being a little scummy and just dumping them places. These ones specifically are in Fort Dodge. And so GM and Mid-American ended up having to clean it up, but we were bringing action against the recycling company who was supposed to deal with it in the first place, Global Fiberglass Solutions. And so that petition has been filed, so you can go find it, but we are working on getting relief for all that physical waste that was taking up a lot of Iowa. So I really enjoyed my time this summer, and it was a lot more interesting than I expected it to be. So I appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to see familiar faces and some new ones. My name is Mateen Karimi. I'll give a couple quick remarks and let Nate pop in. I'm a 2L here at University of Iowa, and I worked at the Iowa Environmental Council over the summer, and I absolutely loved it. It was a great summer experience as a first-year law student who was curious about this space, and it was more of an educational tutorial about all things environmental in the context of Iowa, which was really meaningful to me personally because I'd like to practice in Iowa. Over the summer, I worked on projects ranging from both state issues and federal ones in areas of water quality, energy, and the agricultural industry. Speaking in general terms, I had the chance to witness firsthand the interactions between Iowa DNR, nonprofit groups, and the EPA to address significant and glaring water quality issues in the state and why we have those water quality issues. In energy realm, I had the chance to explore more about administrative procedure in Iowa and the Iowa Utility Commission's, not the IUB anymore, the IUC's role in hopefully coaxing utility companies to do better. And also learning a little bit about rate case hearings, which are very arduous and complex. I even had the chance to learn more about FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and the pressures that are put on our federal government nationally to meet our ambitious climate targets. And I got to do all this in Iowa, which I couldn't be more grateful for the opportunity. I think I found my calling. And with that, go ahead, Nathan.
Well, Mateen found his calling, which is really awesome. I worked a little bit more specifically on issues of air and water quality. In particular, I worked on the Swamp Buster lawsuit, CTM Holdings versus USDA. If you want your agricultural subsidies, you need to certify that you're engaging in agriculture in a relatively responsible manner. That is, you need to certify that you're farming your highly erodible cropland with a plan and you're not destroying more wetlands than you started with. And there's a case challenging the constitutionality and some of the administrative provisions around that piece of regulation or that condition on government spending, depending on how you want to frame it. And I got to engage quite comprehensively in examining the merits of the case, examining how we might intervene, and working towards doing so, which has been quite exciting to watch IEC making progress there. Additionally, I got to work on some core CAFO issues. Like Sam William, Iowa was just reviewing our CAFO rules, which was very exciting as relates to karst. I also got to work on some land application of manure above scientifically backed standards, which was very interesting as well. So a big shout out to IEC. Mike was very intentional about his mentorship and with connecting us with a variety of practitioners around the state. So thanks to them and thanks to Healy.
Hello, everyone. All four of us were with the Driftless Water Defenders this summer, which is a newly founded environmental nonprofit here in Iowa working to educate, advocate, and litigate for clean water here in Iowa. As was mentioned multiple times, Sam did a really good job of setting up what karst topography is, and the Driftless region of Iowa, which is in the Northeast region, is specifically susceptible to pollution in their water table. So we were working to advocate for better water quality in Iowa. And then I'll turn it over to the boys to talk about the 3 different areas of what we did this summer. And I would also like to mention that since it was founded this summer, we got to see a lot of the foundations of how you start a nonprofit, which was a really cool learning experience, especially as someone who's interested in doing nonprofit work in the future.
All right, so I'm Chris, and I'll be talking over the first sort of point that we had there, the educating. And so as Nina was saying, in the Northeast region of Iowa, that's where the karst strain is. And so one of the things we were trying to do as a nonprofit was to build our base of members who might have issues to give rise to future litigation. And so what we did for that was we tried to identify key cities that would be relatively easy for a large majority of the county to reach. And we tried to hold meetings sort of across all of those counties in the Driftless area of Iowa. We started with Decorah and we ended with Dubuque, but we hit a whole bunch of other towns along the way. And so to do that, we would try to send out mailers, we would try to send out radio advertisements, and we would also coordinate with speakers and I believe some other organizations as well who would come in and talk about their issues while we sort of had a crowd there.
All right. Hi, I'm Mark up there, and I wanted to talk to everyone about one of the ongoing projects we had, which was proposing a state constitutional amendment. And this was a proposal for an amendment on the state level for clean air and clean water. And so what we did is over the summer, like we said, it was a new nonprofit that started by Chris Jones and Jim LaRue and some others. And so we really did a lot of researching and drafting on it. One of the first things we did is we looked at states across the country that have environmental amendments. They all kind of differ a little bit, even in their timing and context, but we looked at Pennsylvania, New York, and Hawaii, for example. And what we did is we came up with language that we thought would be well suited for Iowa in particular, but we also talked to Maya Van Rossum, who's actually the woman on the screen there who has her own nonprofit, who has a green amendment movement nationwide advocating for these kinds of amendments. And we also spoke with Representative Eisenhart here in Iowa, who's proposed amendment along those lines. And so we sort of focused on what the language would be like and also some difficulties, including the political process of actually getting an amendment to go through. But that's what we researched in regard to that project. So I'll turn it over to Noah.
Hello, my name is Noah Gaber. I'm just going to kind of finish up here pretty briefly with the sort of third part of our duties this summer was to begin drafting a chapter on litigating water quality issues within the state of Iowa. So the plan is for this handbook to be generally about litigating environmental issues, all environmental issues across Iowa. This involved a lot of identifying laws and also trying to find some ways around some of the DNR administrative procedure aspects and identifying maybe some more common law causes of action. And other than that, I do want to say that while we weren't there anymore, we had left already, the Driftless Water Defenders has filed a lawsuit against the Winneshiek County Board of Supervisors, the Winneshiek County Board of Assessors, and the Winneshiek County Board of Assessors for essentially not providing an adequate public hearing under Iowa's Administrative Procedure Act regarding digesters up in Winneshiek County that they're trying to build. There was also one thing recently that I saw that the Driftless Water Defenders were able to get something of a win in that they were able to get the an administrative law judge here in Iowa to have the DNR assess water use permits, not only for beneficial use for quantity, but also quality, which hasn't been done before. Before it was just if you wanted a water use permit, you had to essentially show that you weren't going to use it all up. And that's the most of it.
My name is Bryce Murgis, and I work for the Environmental Law and Policy Center. They're a nonprofit group based out of Chicago, focusing on work in the Midwest, specifically with policy and litigation research. So I started out this summer by mostly focusing on state and federal law issues relating to some of the information we were seeking relating to rate-making cases, which I spent most of the summer working on. So after that, I helped prepare the senior attorney, Josh Mandelbaum, for cross-examination and helping prepare documents for that. And I got to sit in on the hearing at the Iowa Utilities Commission. I was there with Mateen and Nate. So that was also, as I said, a very complex process. I'm not sure I still fully understand, but it was interesting and awesome to get that experience. So yeah, mostly I just spent my time working on that with the utility regulation. So a lot of background research as I wasn't very familiar with that. So I was able to attend some rulemaking proceedings as well to see how those work. And that's mostly the stuff that I did this summer.
We have one more. I'm going to see. I don't know if she's going to be on here. Oh yeah, sorry. I know we have one more after I was going to see. Sonia's in broad. Okay,
Everyone, my name is Charles Peterson. I worked for Clean Wisconsin this summer. They're based out of Madison, Wisconsin, and it was a really good opportunity. They're not just a legal division; they have both a science and a policy departments as well. So it was really cool to both work with my fellow legal interns as well as science interns who are doing different research on nitrates and lots of different projects and research opportunities. The two main things I worked on was first researching anaerobic digesters. It's a sort of like renewable natural gas system that a lot of CAFOs are developing. I say renewable is sort of misleading. It's not a clean energy source, but it helps mitigate the different natural gas being emitted from these mass animal feeding operations. So it's kind of in researching that type of permitting requirements that Wisconsin has and whether helping develop Clean Wisconsin's recommendations for having safer requirements and regulations when it comes to implementing those, as it's a growing industry in that state. And then the second thing I really researched and looked into was the Wisconsin DNR has something called the Triennial Standards Review, where every 3 years they review the type of things that they're working on, what kind of protections they're looking at implementing. And so they opened it up for a comment period that we submitted comments for. So I did a lot of research regarding water quality standards and designated uses, where the Wisconsin DNR will designate certain protections based on what that water system's designated use is. So what we were really recommending for was having a specific designated use for wild rice water protections. A lot of water systems, specifically northern Wisconsin and indigenous tribal land areas, have wild rice that they really rely on for both nutrients as well as cultural reasons. So we were advocating that the Wisconsin DNR designate specific protections for those type of water systems. And it was a really great experience. It was awesome getting to spend the summer in a different city I had never lived in or even visited before. And a lot of really good, unique experience in administrative law that I had never really seen how that type of stuff works and how those type of protections and systems are set up. So thank you again to Hubble for providing that opportunity. And thank you.
See if we can get. Oh, look at this. We're gonna make it happen. Let's see. Okay. Sonia, are you ready to go? Can you hear us?
Yep, I'm ready to go.
Go for it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sonia. I'm off in the Netherlands right now, which is why I am coming into y'all virtually. I am a 3L at the University of Iowa, and I was working with HHS this summer. It was a wonderful experience working in health and human services, especially right after the restructuring. It was very unique in the fact that, obviously, with all the change going on, it felt like every time that you were proposing something, there was a lot of openness and willingness to change. So sometimes you hear a proposal and then 2 weeks later, the change is already implemented, which made it a super, an experience I'm definitely going to treasure. My experience was mostly around quarantine orders, confidentiality, and I had some experiences as well watching autopsies, and with nursing homes and those sorts of research projects in memos. I'm very grateful to Hubble for helping me make this opportunity happen and being able to serve in the state government.
Great job. Thank you, Sonia.